Hello there, Qckslvrslash, and today I have a review of the Tier 10 battleship, the Montana. Now, I've had this one for a while, but haven't got around to doing a review of it, and I don't really know why, and with the string of battleship games and just really loving the class right now, I felt now is really as good a time as any to put up a review and really dig into this ship, and it gives me a break from grinding up the German line. So, one of the things that kind of bugs me about the Montana, it's a paper ship. I don't tend to like paper ships as much. The Iowa class I loved, partly because of the USS Missouri, and it's a ship I've been to and been on. And the Montanas were a class of ship that got cancelled. Their hulls ended up being used to make aircraft carriers, is my understanding. And it was really at that point in time where the US really respected aircraft carriers and how effective they can be, and they were moving away from the main battleship. So the Montana never got made, and it also meant Montana is the only state that never had a class of battleship named after it at the time. So digging into the stats, survivability of 100, but that's standard for all these tier 10 battleships. When you dig into the hit points, 96,300. The Yamato has 97,200, and the Qckslvrslash has 105,800. So she's definitely at the lower end as far as actual hit points, but makes up a bit in armor, 19 to 409 millimeters, pretty much identical to the Yamato, and the Qckslvrslash maxes out at 380 millimeters of armor. For torpedo reduction, 39%, pretty decent for an American ship, but, you know, not the 55% the Japanese get, but way better than the 25% of the Germans. What really makes each Tier 10 battleship kind of unique so far is their guns, or at least until the Germans came, it was really the guns. The Yamato had bigger guns, but only 3 turrets of 3, and the Montana had 4 turrets of 3. But digging in more, looking at them, 406mm guns, a 30-second reload, which is right on par with the other two Tier 10s, 38.3 second 180-degree turret time, which is much better than the Yamato's 72 seconds, and pretty much equal to the German. Depending on the German ship, whether you use the 406s or the 420s, you're looking at 29 with either you're looking at 40 seconds. The reload is 29 or 32 seconds. Damage is good, 13,500, but the Yamato and those bigger guns gets 14,800. Now, where you're really thinking about is dispersion, how accurate these. And 264 meters doesn't seem like that good of accuracy, and it's a little worse than the Yamato's, but compared to the Germans' 268, it's pretty much the same. And the ships kind of handle the same way. They're a little more brawly than the standoff that the Japanese one is. Really good gun range, 23.6 kilometers. She can outrange the Qckslvrslash, but 3 kilometers short of the 26.6 the Yamato gets, but really you don't want to be firing out to those ranges anyways. I find past 20 kilometers, you're more hoping the enemy ship drives in a straight line, and with everyone having the situational awareness skill now as just a universal skill, people realize they're spotted and they don't tend to track in those straight lines because, your friendly DD will go up, get vision, the battleship realizes they're spotted, or cruiser, and they start weaving. So it means, I prefer not to take shots past kind of 23 kilometers, definitely 23, past 20 kilometers, because it's not that the guns aren't reliable on any of these ships, it's just the other ships tend to move too much to get reliable connections. Moving on, she's got an impressive array of secondaries, these twin-barreled 127mm guns. She has 5 per side, and with the right skills and mods, 9.1 kilometer range, and I have this ship built in its secondary form, and the reason for that is it really boosts your secondaries and it brings your AA right up towards 100, so you don't have to fear planes as much. Midway is still going to decimate you because those torpedo bombers are just so fast that, you know, they get in and out of your AA zone so quickly they don't really take a hit. But tier 9s, tier 8 carriers are gonna have a really hard time getting close to you. And since I was talking about a, pretty standard layout, I wouldn't say there's anything special, but it is very good compared to the Yamato, which gets a 69 rating, and the Qckslvrslash gets an 82, and that's without captain skills or modules, so the Germans are really going to be able to match this. The Yamato just a little behind, despite the Yamato having some amazing secondaries as well. Now, maneuverability, I'd say, is really where this ship is at its best. She's a little quicker than the Yamato at 27 knots, or compared to the Yamato's 27 knots. The Montana's 30, I really like. That 30 knot mark is a good speed, except for one point. The standard time indicator is pretty much, it is exactly what you need to lead an enemy ship by if it's doing 30 knots. So if you're driving at top speed, square onto something, they're going to have a very easy time ranging in on you. So you do need to vary that, but the speed allows you to get out of trouble. Her turning circle, a little worse than the Yamato's, 950 meters compared to 900, but better than the Qckslvrslash and its giant 1050 meter turning circle, and her rudder is the most responsive at 17.8 second shift time when compared to all the other ships. And her concealment is also the best, with a rating of 14, surface detectability of 17.3. And I know some people have talked about doing a stealth build on this and being able to sneak up, but I just find that once you hit this tier of battleship, they're all so big and easily detected that, to me, that isn't a skill I'd take. I'd go a different direction. So let's look at the modules. As far as upgrades go, I've gone with main armament modification 1, keep all the turrets firing, and it's a pretty easy choice for me. You know, you're going to lose secondaries, their armor isn't as good, and I run the flags to make sure I don't get detonated. Slot 2, I've gone with secondary battery modification 2 to push that range out to the 9.1. Just because of personal preferences, I don't like firing out at that outer limit of the range, so pushing it past 23 really not needed for me, and I'm not willing to sacrifice the reload to speed the turret traverse up. The AA mod really is the only one I would consider, and if you could guarantee in every game that you would see enemy aircraft carriers, I would probably run the AA mod, but because of how many games I'm in where enemy aircraft carriers just aren't a thing, running equipment specifically for that to me feels like a loss. Now, in ranked play at that, rank 1 tier 10 thing, you kind of know who's going to be in the queue, so you can pick and choose, but for just random, I'd rather have the secondary mod, and that's what I've chosen. In slot 3, I've gone with Artillery Plotting Room mod 2 to bring that dispersion down to something more reasonable. Slot 4, Damage Control mod 1. So many things are going to shoot HE at you, and you're going to take torpedoes that any reduced chance to them, to me, is the benefit, and I've never lost my engine or steering in this ship. Slot 5, I've got steering gear modification. That massive turning circle, you need rudder shift, and that's why I run that. And then in slot 6, I've gone with target acquisition. Now, before I used to run concealment, but with one of the patches they added that this increases torpedo acquisition range and increased spotting range. So those two things to me really sealed the deal. I switched over to target acquisition because you can't afford to sail broadside into a bunch of torpedoes. And there are times that destroyers are going to get the jump on you, and just that little extra acquisition really helps, especially since I don't have it in my captain skill. As for my commander, I've gone with basics of fire training, and I've backfilled with basics of survivability after I got my 5th tier skill. Tier 2, expert marksman, speed up the turrets, superintendent, and then full secondaries, advanced fire training, and manual fire control for secondary armament. And that 60% maximum dispersion bonus, that, or minus 60%, is invaluable at this tier. The one caveat is you have to be paying attention. You have to manually select something. If you have not, your secondary guns will not fire at anything, and your guns only fire at the one target you've selected. So this is really only a skill if you've gone full secondaries and you're planning on focusing on maintaining those selections, and you do have to switch between different targets even if there's a bunch inside, because just like using your main guns, you don't want to shoot at something that's nose on to you. You don't want your secondaries spraying things nose on, particularly destroyers. So if you've got a couple destroyers coming in, you want to pick the one that's more advantageous for them to be shooting at. Or if you're nose in on a battleship that's 5k away, it doesn't really help to have secondaries shooting straight forward because only 1 or 2 of them. So switching it to side targets, it's an extra thing to maintain, and a lot of people have no problem with that. I don't mind doing it, but just a little warning there. So now that you've seen how I've set it up and how her stats compare, it is time to jump into some gameplay. So this first little bit I have for you is really just to demonstrate the absolute shit kicking that the Montana can take when surrounded and in not the best situation. You can see my team pretty much pushed into A, and they're playing Ring Around the Rosie, chasing after the stern of all these battleships, and Izumo, Tirpitz, Bismarck, and Montana. And rather than follow in with my team, I decided to kind of head them off and try to slow them up so that we end up, putting the enemy team in a pincer. So I've got the engine astern, and I'm just going to try to start laying into these battleships, picking out whichever one I feel is giving me the best angle or is the most threatening. And you can see that first volley of the Montana shells come in, and they more or less bounce off my side, and I'm going to very quickly become the focus of the enemy team. So I've got my engines reversed. I don't want to get close to that Tirpitz and Bismarck and their torpedoes. And I'm going to focus on them because really that Tirpitz is almost already inside his torpedo range. Now granted, he would have to give me a broadside to launch those torpedoes, but it's not a risk I want to take. You can see my secondaries blasting away at him and lighting fires that I otherwise wouldn't be. He gets hit by some torpedoes. I fire one of my rear turrets and then both front ones, and that's going to finish him off. So one down. I put out the pair of fires that I've got going on me, and I decide to switch to the Izumo because he's giving me a better shot with that one turret. I kind of mislead it, and he turns, and it just deflects off him. So next up is this Bismarck, and he's giving me big old fat broadside. Put the rounds in the air. Really solid hit, 16,000 damage between all those shells. May not have been a Citadel, but you don't have to get Citadels to do massive damage. The Des Moines and Montana and Bismarck, they all continue to just rain fire down on me. You can see a pair of fires going. That Bismarck's going to burn down, so I switch to the Izumo, hoping to get something into his side, but he's turning away, and, well, 3 penetrations, but no damage, which is a little odd. Modules must have eaten all of that. So right here I see these enemy aircraft coming in. They're from a Tier 9 Taiho. I kick the engines full ahead and target them. You can see the AA starting to fire. And this gives you kind of an idea of how this ship handles an attack from a pair of torpedo bombers. Now I'm fortunate in that it was a terrible drop on his part because I was pretty much stationary at the start, but it doesn't stop me from getting an entire squadron of his aircraft. And it's kind of here that I realize I'm probably going to die, but things are looking pretty decent for my team, and this is actually going to go on to be a win. You know, 20,000 damage less than my hit points, but I still felt I contributed by slowing the enemy up and allowing my team some time to get into position. But let's get on to a full game now. So here we are with a game on Shatter, which is one of my favorite maps because it's Canada. And I'm from Canada. I've spent a lot of time in the seas around this nation, and I've never quite seen this geological formation, but it doesn't make it any less fun of a map. Now, in Ranked, I started to hate it because the meta was ridiculous, but in random play, I don't mind it one bit. And as you can see, pretty decent game, you know, a couple tier 10s, well, 3 tier 10s on a team, some tier 9s, and a lot of tier 8s. And you really like these games when you're in a tier 10 because you matter. And in this game, my actions or inactions are going to have a greater effect on the overall outcome. You know, if I play like crap, that's a big hit to my team's overall firepower. If I have a solid, smartly played game, I can really help carry my team, and that's a reason I love being big ship or big tank in a game, is I matter a little more. That doesn't mean you don't matter when you're small, you know. If you're a tier 6 in a tier 8 game and you have an amazing game, chances are your team's gonna win. And here's a perfect example of why, you know, I don't like really firing at things outside of 20 kilometers. Pretty well aimed shells, and had he driven straight, those would have been dead center of his ship. But all he had to do was turn a couple of degrees, complete miss, and I'm going to keep shooting at him because there's nothing else for me to shoot at, but it's the reason I don't worry about boosting the range of my main guns. You know, if they can shoot 20k, that's good enough for me. It's well outside any detection range I have to deal with. And you can see the second volley looking pretty good. The shells plunge in, no massive damage, but still 7,000, and you know, it's hit points he doesn't have anymore. You can see those Yamato shells coming back at me, and I haven't exactly been driving a straight course, and his dispersion means not one even hits me. And just further kind of reinforcing that point of I don't enjoy the long sniper game where you pray for luck and the stupidity of the enemy player to drive straight to carry you through. I like to get in close, you know, 10 kilometers or so, and really like bare knuckle brawl with the guy. And that's where I have the most fun. It's a reason I've loved this American line, and it's a reason I've really been enjoying the German line. And the people who try to stand off like a Japanese battleship typically would, and just rely on better accuracy and long range to carry the battle, I don't think are going to have as good a time in this line, but it doesn't mean they aren't amazing ships. So looking at the map, I can see a pair of cruisers and a DD at B, and I really want to get in here and just ace these cruisers with my guns, but I can't do too much until I know where that destroyer is, and I'm turning off in case he fired some torpedoes right down that alley where you can see some friendly torpedoes going. And I would push straight into B, but you're going to see enemy Iowa up here and just the uncertainty of where that Fubuki is. Is it a Fubuki or is it a Hatsuharu? Yep, a Fubuki. where that Fubuki is prevents me from charging in there. And those are just things you cannot afford to do in a big battleship like this. All the tier 10 battleships have massive turning circles and aren't going to dodge torps that are well aimed from any kind of distance. So I go to about half speed here and start turning, hoping to put a broadside into this Iowa, thinking he's just going to charge in here, you know, without thinking. And I really think he thought the same thing, because you can see he clips one into my bow, I clip one into his. We both overlead each other, thinking the other is just at full speed. So I'm just going to start to circle here, continue to put shells into him, and wait until I see that that DD is well and clear of B before charging in there myself. And one of the big things you're going to notice about this game, a bit of a slow start. I don't have any massive damage hits early, and I'm not really in a position to do too much early, but I find that's what you have to do in high tier battleships, because if you just go charging in somewhere, a DD or cruiser with torpedoes or enemy battleship is going to ace you, or you're going to get focused down. You have to be patient in these ships. You know, the only way you're going to get big damage is by letting your guns fire for the duration of the entire game. Now I get a bit lucky here that Iowa pretty much had a broadside, and only one of his shells connects. So, bit of a lucky strike there, but not going to complain. And now that I know that Fubuki is well clear of that channel, I'm going to go charging in at this Iowa. And it's about here that I pretty much become permanently joined at the hip with our Bismarck, Eliphas the Inheritor. And him and I are going to do some really good work. And I've had some comments about, you know, how do ships perform as low tier, you know, against the bigger opponents. And the reality is, most ships don't perform that well when they're bottom tier. Or at least they don't perform well alone. When you're bottom tier, you really need to support your top tier teammates, and if you can do that, you're still going to have amazing games and really get to put out some great damage, but you're not going to put your ship in a situation it's just going to get aced. So you'll see throughout this battle, he kind of shadows me, providing gun support and helping kill the targets that, you know, could kill me without putting himself at too much of a risk.
Torpedoes to starboard.
So I've already begun slowing up because I saw that Fubuki coming in, which is a good thing because it looks like there's Zhao threw some torpedoes up the channel, and I lose sight of that Fubuki. A cyclone begins to close in right now. I put the shots out, and 6 connections, all over pens, but with guns this size and over pen, you know, 6 of them is well over 6,000 damage, erases his remaining hit points, and with the positioning of everything, I can pretty much afford to go straight at this Iowa without exposing myself to more than one ship. I'm going to eat one of the torpedoes here, but it was something I expected, and I quickly run damage control and repair party. So one of the things I absolutely love about Cyclones is they let you, if you're smart with that 8-kilometer detection range, focus in on single targets, as we're doing to this Iowa. You can see those cruisers all down to the south, they can't help him, and the friendly battleships are nowhere to help either. Now if normal detection ranges were in effect, I would probably be taking some shells here, but I'm not. And you can just see my secondaries ripping away at him, lighting fires, as I use my main guns to chip away at his health.
The ship is on fire.
And the enemy Iowa kind of makes a decision here that they are not going to shoot at me. And I understand that. I'm nose on. Odds are he's not getting a penetration at me. So he starts shooting at the Bismarck that's just over past my port quarter, and I'm going to use the opportunity to really close in on him and try to get some big hits into his citadel before I lose my friendly Bismarck. And right now, only 2 of my secondaries are firing, the front 2. And just, 4 fires, over 60 hits combined between them all. Don't put the best shot in there with my front 2 guns. Hopefully the rear 2 are a little better. But it kind of doesn't matter because I'm getting some really good fire damage out of those secondaries, plus the actual damage. He's got just over 7,000 hit points, and I'm going to stop paying attention to him. Between the Bismarck and my fires and secondaries, he is a goner. And I've now got over 100 secondary hits, and they account for a large part of my damage so far. Now you can see my team has fallen behind, so capturing C is very important. If I were to let it tick away, we could lose on score here alone. We're well, not well down, but we're 2 ships down so far. And I'm hoping this Cyclone lasts longer, because if it does, I can continue to kind of pick away at things without worrying about really too many things shooting at me. So next up on the hit list is this Hindenburg. I'm going to drive into sea while waiting for him to open on this edge of land, and then hopefully be able to chase down that Tirpitz. And I kind of feel bad for him because I'm not spotted. He's got no idea I'm here pretty much until I fire, and by then it's too late. 4 penetrations, 3 over penetrations, and he is dead. I was a little off to hit his citadel, but it just doesn't matter with these 12 barrels of just destruction. So one of the big things now is kind of the mind game. The Tirpitz was last spotted way up here in the middle of nowhere. Where's he going to be? And I'm thinking I'm going to put my guns to starboard, but I can't afford to drive off on a goose chase, chasing after him. If he's driven up here because he's disconnected or AFK and just run into the border edge, chasing him down puts me way out of position. I need to really try to get back to this cap. I am, however, still going to put my guns onto the starboard side in case I spot him as I kind of round over and try to head towards these enemies to attack them. You can see we've got half the points of them, but we do have 2 cap points. And that's when the Tirpitz gets spotted. So you can see my secondaries don't fire at first, and that's just, I didn't target him right away. I was zoomed in with my primaries, waiting to take a shot, and maybe that's not a bad thing, because as you're about to see, some massive damage, just shy of 17,000 into him with those 2 front turrets. And then I locked the secondaries. Unfortunately, myself and Eliphas are about to have a miscommunication. He was actually busy typing. You'll see him admit to that in chat. And I had turned in to dodge potential torpedoes. And with our communication error and collision, I'm going to eat one of these torps, and he's going to eat a pair. So I quickly repair the damage and start to use a repair party to recover some of the hit points. Now maybe it wasn't best used there, but with 3 of them remaining and what's left and the number of hit points, I didn't want to wait to take more damage before using one. I'd rather go into the next situation, kind of as many eggs in my basket as possible. And a lot of this game is really going to count on me and Eliphas, to carry our team. We're down by 2 ships. One of our cruisers is busy chasing down a DD. The other one is kind of sticking in this channel. He is busy engaging the enemies, and he's gonna get a kill here, but you know, something just drove into B, and it's not their DD, so I start turning nose in because it could be their Yamato. Luckily it isn't. It's a Mogami. I aim, fire the front 2 guns, and that poor sucker. I just did 30,000 damage to him, leaving him on next to no health. Eliphas finishes him off. Now, my secondaries would have, and I could have gotten a Kraken, but at this point I don't care. I'd every time prefer to win a game over getting one of the silly awards. And I move over to try to dodge any incoming torpedoes. I sidestep them and put 2 citadels into the Yamato, knocking him down 27,000 hit points. And I've got my secondaries blazing away at him, but he looks to be turning to try to ram me, so I slow up, and this is where sticking together comes in handy. You can see him put a pair of AP shells into the Yamato, killing him, and thankfully saving me from the ram. Now, having taken my speed off, unfortunately, I'm not going to get there to put any shots into this New Orleans before Eliphas manages to rip into him too. And here you're going to see what happens to a tier 8 fighter torpedo squadron when it gets close to me. 4 kills before they even manage to drop, and it's one of the reasons I love this ship. Between the secondaries and the AA, your kind of tertiary damage beyond, you know, your main armaments really starts to stack up and keeps you safe. Now, I would consider running that AA mod, as I mentioned, if I could guarantee there was going to be a carrier in every game. But since you can't, I stick to secondary battery modification number 2, because it's just, to me, it feels like a more all-around build. So you can see we've now taken the lead both in kills and points. We've got 2 of the caps. This game is pretty much in the bucket. Their Lexington is about to get erased by our cruiser, and I like what our Zhao is doing. You know, he's getting out of it. You know, he could choose to continue to engage and try to milk some extra damage, but he pulls away. They get out of detection range from one another, and I just hate when allies turn in because, oh, this game's in hand, so they just turn in to try to milk some more damage and end up eating it and costing the game. I've got just over a quarter of my hit points left. Still have a repair party. Damage control is off of cooldown. I can afford to chase down this Zhao. Meanwhile, you know, ours 6,000 hit points, the Bismarck 2,000 hit points, they're pulling out of this game, and I don't mind that. You know, minute 40 left. We're either going to win this by time or by cap with just under 100 points to go. You know, I can face the Zhao alone, and he's not going to be able to kill me in that time. He's not going to get torps into me. I'm going to play smartly. Get him detected, just over 10k, still out of torpedo range. I put a pair of shells, or a pair of turrets onto him. Fire. I'm going to miss, but this one, once again, is more on me than on the guns. I didn't correctly account for his angle, and most of the shells go long. The dispersion basically accounting for the 2 connections I did have.
The ship is on fire.
And he ends up behind the island, so he becomes undetected, and I do as well. I've still got friendly fire hitting him. I try to aim. I was expecting him to kind of continue that turn. It looks like he didn't, but at this point, the game is over. We've won. We came from behind. We were down massively on both points and kills. And, you know, our team stuck together and pulled this one out, and it is just perfect demonstration of why I love this ship. When you get in close to those brawling ranges, you can just erase ships in a single volley, and your secondaries, finish off anything. Well, in this game, patience really paid off, and I find that's kind of how you have to play the Montana all around. You just have to be patient and let things come into you, and once they get close, you can just devastate them. You saw that massive hit put into the turrets and the Mogami, and that's when this ship is great, is when you get in close. 645,000 credits, 5,000 experience, close quarter, dreadnought, devastating strike, Confederate, 163,000 damage, 56 hits, shot down a couple planes, but they never really came for me. But against like a tier 8 carrier like that, I don't even have to worry about them with this setup. 4 kills, 8 fires, 4 citadels, assisted in the capture 2 of the bases, and 174 secondary hits. And no surprise on this one, top of the team, 2,835 experience, absolutely cleaning up. And look at the spread of this damage. So main battery, 132,000. I only fired AP, so another 30,000 out of those secondaries, which really, really helpful to have that kind of damage coming out. And I never really had a chance to use them against like a destroyer or something trying to close me. The one thing I will say though about using that tier 5 secondary skill is they don't fire if you don't target something. And I have in the past forgot to pick something inside that 9.1 range, and as a result my secondaries have done nothing. So if you're going to use that skill, you have to keep on top of it and really pick the targets that are best for your secondaries to be shooting at. But really happy with this one. 41,000 to the Iowa, 20,000 to a Tirpitz, 12,000 to the Hindenburg. I one hit that Fubuki when he came out broadside on. Almost 50,000 to their Yamato, 31,000 to that Mogami that came around the corner, and yeah, some team damage. Wasn't really intended. I forgive Eliphas, the inheritor there. He said he was typing when he came around that corner at me. I had to turn in because of the torpedo threat. I couldn't keep driving side on, and unfortunately we ran into each other, and it made us both eat some of those torpedoes. And as you can see, I walked away with 300,000 from this game. So tier 10s can make money if you have a good game. Now, if I hadn't been running Zulu and had been on a basic account, I only would have made 30,000. So, you've got to have good games to really be able to make money. And 4,900 base XP, 9,000 for the commander, and just all around great game. I really like driving the Montana. I remember back when I got it, the kind of thinking was Yamato is better, hands down, and I just haven't found that over all the games I've played it. It's been a lot of fun. I like having the 4 turrets, especially when you get in close brawling. And the brawling range in this ship isn't the same as others. You do have to stay a little further back because of that sluggish handling. But that's across the board at tier 10 battleships. They're just so big, they cannot turn the same kind of way. Anyways, if you liked this, please give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel. If you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down and I'll try to figure out what I can improve. I always love hearing from you guys in the comment section and pretty much try to answer every single one I get. And as always, I'll have another one for you guys tomorrow.